It is with great pleasure and anticipation that Alison and I welcome you here tonight at the Emily Harvey Foundation for this 4-day conference devoted to Higgins Something Else Press and to Higgins' concept of intermedia, which the press exemplified. It seems fitting that this event takes place in this place, at this site, for it was here over 3 decades ago, in what was then the Emily Harvey Gallery, that I will regularly meet Dick and benefit from his precious insights and support after I committed myself to collect and to assemble a collection of the Something Else Press output. I conceived this project from the standpoint of an artist. This collection, held here at the Emily Harvey Foundation, is one of the most complete in existence. It comprises a full run of the extraordinary books, the Great Bear pamphlet series, the newsletters and news cards, the catalogues, the full set of art prints, the ephemera, and some important financial and legal documents from the press. 2 years ago, while working in the Foundation archive, Alice and I began looking at this exceptional material in a new way, pondering whether how one could cast it in the form of an exhibition. In the process of our research, from the Getty to the Somme archive in Stuttgart and elsewhere, as so many new details came to light, it became clear to us that this little known material constituted a rich framework for new scholarship, and that this might be initiated by triggering a conversation as multifaceted as its historical object. A concept-driven symposium which will help amplify all the material we had assembled. So, we are utterly thrilled and deeply grateful to our distinguished speakers for accepting our invitation to share with us their thought and work and help us take the record of the press further. We envisage this conference to function as a kind of think tank that will address the challenges of realizing this intricate object that is an exhibition built around the output and the activities of the Something Else Press and of the lesser known Something Else Gallery. Our hope is that the 4 panels of the conference, dealing with a subject as concrete as the direct testimonies on how the press functions, to the more abstract scope of the printed word across the fields of art, the artist's book from concrete poetry to other kind of experimental writing, to exhibition model and radical small-scale publishing today, will generate many unforeseen insights and new perspectives which will widen the breadth of our project. This conference is dedicated to Dick Higgins. It was made possible thanks to the generous funding of the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Art and the full support of the Emily Harvey Board. Finally, we would like to render a special homage to Alison Knowles, here is present, who was integral to the entire operation of the press alongside Dick Higgins, and who famously named it. Give it a name. I will now defer to Alice, who will draw a brief historical background of the press and introduce the 4 panel and the speakers for today's evening. But before I do so, sadly, I must inform you that a sudden and unexpected health incident will prevent Benjamin Buclo from delivering his paper tomorrow, as he, and I know that for a fact, so much wanted. So I do want to thank Benjamin still for the exchange we've had to date regarding his abstract and the intermedia panel at large. Tomorrow panel will take place as planned, and we feel extremely fortunate that Hannah Higgins has accepted, with hardly any notice, no notice, to present a recent unpublished paper she wrote on intermedia. So, thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you all.
I'm Alison. I would like to join Christian in welcoming all of you to this conference dedicated to Dick Higgins' Something Else Press. We are thrilled and honored to have you here today. Before we open this conference, I would like to provide some brief background on the press. Emerging from a period of far-reaching experimentation, at the most intense and hectic moment of a new collective art movement which had just arrived in New York, namely Fluxus, the Something Else Press was launched by an artist acting as publisher. It operated between 1963 and 1974 in New York for its first 7 years, for a brief stint in California, and finally in Vermont. In only a decade, it published 49 books, establishing a wave of American reception for the new diverse artistic tendencies of the 1960s. Thank you. Such as new music, fluxus, concrete and sound poetry, simultaneities, and other innovative forms of writing, intertextuality, and performance that still resist labels and categorization. Just as importantly, the press took the initiative to publish landmarks of the historical avant-garde, including Luigi Russolo's 1913 manifesto L'arte dei rumori, The Art of Noises, Richard Holzenbeck's 1920 Dada Almanac, many scarcely available writings by Gertrude Stein, and John Cage's mentor, Henry Cowell's early 20th century world music. By combining the wisdom of great New York publishers and the new instincts and impetus around Fluxus, the output of the press represents an extraordinary map of the 20th century. In a decade of diverse exploratory publishing efforts, from Fluxus to conceptual art, how to interpret Higgins' dual commitment, on the one hand, to reach the widest possible audience, and on the other, the highest publication standards, evinced in the stunning quality of the book objects. It seems that the latter acted as a kind of Trojan horse to broaden the interest in underknown or new and often cryptic verbal visual manifestations. The conventional frame of the book, in other words, supported the radical and ephemeral content. As a counterpart to the impeccably made books, the press released a series of booklets, folded letter-sized colored sheets that range between 16 and 32 pages, called the Great Bear pamphlets. Through the strategy of alternating a pricey publication with an inexpensive pamphlet, Higgins achieved his dream of having avant-garde documents available in grocery stores. In addition, the press had a space for shows and performance, the Something Else Gallery, which was intermittently active between 1966 and 1972 and presented exhibitions like object poems, sound installations from figures like Max Neuhaus, music concert by the Tone Rhodes Ensemble, and workshops by Cage and James Tenney. Higgins made it a priority to extend the influence and distribution channels of his press by connecting with Europe, Canada, Mexico, and South America, creating a network for communication and dialogue on book publishing ideas. In so doing, his press became a global entity, introducing many foreign publication and artists in the United States and vice versa. As Christian has already mentioned, our larger aim is to cast this work into the form of an exhibition, as the vision of one artist channeling and radiating those of many. Higgins was in the front row as a witness and participant of so much that had happened. He was also one of the most erudite artists of this period, and yet, committed and political as he was, he could hardly have imagined the extent to which his utopian effort would have escalated in importance. For us, simply mapping out an archive of this enterprise would be relatively easy. Doing justice to the exhibition doing justice to the complexity in the exhibition now seems utterly essential. To this end, we have envisioned these symposia to gather some of the most knowledgeable people in the field and invite them to think together to explore new possibilities for the development of our project. Driven by the burgeoning scope of intermedia, then and now, we have provisionally parsed this effort at collective thought in 4 perspectives: historical, academic, curatorial, and publishing. Tonight, for the panel entitled The Something Else Factor, we will hear from those close to the press in its time, who are able to convey aspects of its daily operations and the motivations that drove it. Participants include Alison Knowles, who was deeply involved with the press in its gallery from the start, Barbara Moore, the first editor, John Herman, the last one, and Martha Wilson, who gave Higgins and his press its first New York Exhibitions Guild recognition at Franklin Furnace in 1979. Looking ahead, tomorrow's panel will address Higgins's concept of intermedia, which he took as the subject of a lecture in 1963-64 and recast in essay form to publish the first Something Else Press newsletter in 1966. At that time, he defined intermedia as an artwork or conceptual formulation that exceeded the limits of any one medium and indeed resisted categorization. The discussions will ideally help us to consider the relevance of Higgins's mid-1960s model in relation to contemporary practices, illuminating how the medium orientation and the theoretical apparatus of intermedia might continue to inform new cross-disciplinary academic reckonings today. On Saturday, the speakers, engaged in hybrid scholarly and curatorial practices grounded in the possibilities of the archive, will explore methods of treating and exhibiting immaterial forms of art, and discuss new modalities to translate archives into exhibitions. Examining how past shows and historical accounts of radical publishing projects have impacted and implicated artists, the panelists will reflect on how exhibition approaches have been adapted to accommodate the needs of the book format. Finally, on Sunday, a group of publishers known for their treatments of book as art and for their involvement in publication strategies that have become objects of intellectual inquiry in and of themselves, will cast their historical consideration on the founding principles of the Something Else in light of the currently operating initiatives of their contemporary presses. This program of events represents the first major phase of consolidation of the collecting, preservation, and presentation efforts of one of the most thought-provoking projects of the 1960s. Thanks to the speakers who've generously accepted to participate, representing diverse positions that have motivated their practices and intellectual commitments in the field of art and beyond, we hope that this conference will ground the Something Else Press's foundational role. As we must inevitably take up the challenge of positioning the press from the perspective of now, we are excited to ponder initiatives focused on the linguistic, the relational, the intangible, and the ephemeral as a means of knowing's disputed historical object. In light of this evening's panel, before introducing our panelists, we would like to acknowledge the pivotal, as much as missed voice of poet-artist Emmett Williams, who was the press's editor-in-chief between 1966 and 1970. Were he still here with us today, his presence would be relished. For the sake of time, I will read an abridged version of tonight's panelists' bios. For more information, we invite you to consult the program. John Herman worked during the 1960s at City Lights Books, where he was the poet-publisher Lauren Ferlinghetti's editorial assistant. There he started a small press which published beat, post-beat, and Fluxus writers and artists. In 1972, Dick Higgins hired him to succeed Emmett Williams as editor of the Something Else Press. After the press was shuttered, Herman turned to journalism. In the 1980s at the Chicago Sun-Times and in the 1990s at the Los Angeles Times, he wrote widely syndicated commentary about books, theaters, and movies. In 1998, following a mid-career fellowship at Columbia University, he absconded to the internet as a senior editor-producer for MSNBC.com. His latest book, All That Would Ever After Not Be Said, brings together a cycle of poems he's been writing in recent years. Alison Knowles, is a conceptual artist whose work combines mechanical reproduction, events, and actions with participatory installations, performance, sound, poetry, publication, and tactile objects. A founding member of Fluxus, Knowles began using Cajun compositional devices such as indeterminate performance and chance operation in the early 1960s. For Something Else Press, Knowles collaborated with Marcel Duchamp on a screen reprint of his Corps Volant and designed and co-edited John Cage's Notations, a book of visual music scores. Among her Fluxus performance scores are Make a Salad, 1962, Shoes of Your Choice, 1963, and The Identical Lunch, 1969. Knowles' The House of Dust, 1967, produced with James Tenney, was among the earliest computerized poems, winning her a Guggenheim Fellowship in 1968. She brought this work to Cal Arts, where she taught from 1970 to 72. Barbara Moore, director of the Peter Moore Archive, is an independent scholar who was a keen personal witness to and participant in the late 20th century avant-garde art, particularly performance and artist publications. As a fierce advocate of alternative forms of art making for over 55 years, she has been a historian, writer, editor, lecturer, curator, rare book dealer, and archivist, as well as director of the Performance Documentary and Photojournalism Archive of late photographer Peter Moore. She's in the process of finishing her book entitled Observing the Avant-Garde, Peter Moore and the Photography of Performance. Martha Wilson is a pioneering feminist artist and art space director who over the past 4 decades has created innovative photographic and video works that explore her female subjectivity. She has been described by New York Times critic Holland Cotter as one of the half-dozen most important people for art in downtown Manhattan in the 1970s. In 1976, she founded Franklin Furnace, an artist-run space that champions the exploration, promotion, and preservation of artist books, temporary installation, performance art, as well as online works. Wilson is represented by PPOW Gallery in New York. Finally, our moderator, Hannah Higgins, is professor and founding director of the Interdisciplinary Bachelor of Arts and Ideas at the School of Art History at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her interest in the socially situated nature of sensory experience has led to 2 streams of research. One examines how Fluxus, Happenings, and other artists active since the 1960s have pushed back against a predominantly visual paradigm. The other looks at the deep history of sensory organization as grids in European and American culture. Higgins' book include Fluxus Experience, University of California Press 2002, the Grid Book, MIT Press 2009, and the anthology Mainframe Experimentalism, Early Computing and the Foundation of Digital Art, University of California Press 2012, which she co-edited with media historian Douglas Kahn. The daughter of Fluxus artists Dick Higgins and Alison Knowles, she's co-executor of the estate of Dick Higgins and his Something Else Press. Thank you. Without further ado, Hannah Higgins.
What a delight. I don't have a PowerPoint for myself. But I think I'll take just a minute to sort of explain how I hope this evening's events will unfold. I've asked each of the speakers to speak for just a few minutes. It'll be somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes per person on their role at the press, key memories about the press, whatever they really want to do to frame it. And then I would like to actually have them speak to each other. Because as you can imagine, with an organization that was active for, 12 years? 10 years. There are many different points of view in play about what the press was and why it mattered and kind of the day-to-day operations. So at that point, I'd like to have the panel sort of talk among themselves. for a little while and then open it up to the many, many people I see in this audience who actually have a lot of historic background, but also immediate knowledge about the press. And so hopefully at that point, it can become a little bit more of a group conversation. I see some of you nodding. Yes, we will do that. Let's see. Yes. It's coming. Okay. So we are going to be on one.
Can we open the windows a little bit?
Yeah. Now that the sirens have stopped.
Well, I'll sit to the side. Thank you. It's a lot of meetings.
Are they all in order?
They're in order.
Okay, you can open them all together and do a slideshow.
So I don't want to do a slideshow because I can tell you.
Okay, then just you open the profile. The first one you would like to open?
They're in order. And I'm not using all of them, so it's
Okay.
fine.
I mean, it's a bit, but it should be like this.
Okay. All right. Yeah, actually, this comes a little bit further than I was going to say. Okay, well, in late 1964, Dick approached me and said, hello? In late 1964, Dick approached me and said he was thinking of opening a press. And the way he was talking, I thought it was sort of a joke. In the sense that he was opening a press, but it wasn't small, it wasn't underground, and he wasn't claiming it was, but that was the paradigm for what artists and poets and people out of the establishment did in those days. Mimeographed books in grungy storefronts or, very much under the radar kinds of things. And I, at the time, was working as a copywriter and editor in commercial work, mail order catalogs and small advertising agencies. And so I had this job, and I was happy in it, and I sort of shrugged off what Dick was saying and the way he was presenting it, but it seemed like impossible in terms of what I considered an underground kind of press would be. And right after the holidays, at the beginning of 1965, I lost my job, and it was the first time I'd ever been fired, and I was devastated. And I know how. Anyway, in fact, it's better. It's all fine. Anyway, so just by coincidence, Dick didn't know I lost my job, and he called me up shortly after it happened and said, I've got an office. And of course, that was wonderful, perfect timing. And he told me where it was at 165th Avenue, and I went to look at it, I think in late January. That part of Fifth Avenue, near the Flatiron Building, was Publishers Row in those days. But publishers, not like something else, press, obviously. Not like Fluxus. They would never have been able to afford those accommodations. And we had a real office in a regular commercial building, and Dick treated everything in, the paradigm for him was the standard publishing paradigm. And I'm not going to discuss it here, but actually Dick, for all the avant-gardism, Something Else Press was more about literature in many ways, and differed greatly from Fluxus. And there's a lecture I did on the differences that's on YouTube if you can find it. So I'm not going to discuss that here. But anyway, his paradigm definitely was traditional publishing. And he had worked for a book, not the literary publishing, but a book manufacturer, I believe it was, in the production end. And he even held that job for the first 6 or 8 months of the press, until the press was going, and then he quit his day job, so to speak. Anyway, so, as I said, everything was very conventional in terms of the way he approached the mechanics of it. And sure enough, one day, to my great surprise, I came into work, and there on my desk was this little leatherette packet of business cards, like this. It was a huge surprise. And, you know, you will, if you're not familiar with, you can research all his writings about the actual production of books and why it's important. His first catalog was called How to Treat, now suddenly I have that. How to treat a book physically, or how to create a book physically. I can't remember that. But it had to do with, you know, why you would use good paper. He always used acid-free paper, and go to good printers and binders and everything. And obviously that's what the press did. So the reality was much greater than what my expectations had been. And in terms of my experience at the press, I loved working there. Dick and I had a wonderful relationship, and things ran very smoothly. We had discrete responsibilities. Dick chose all the titles. He did the design and production. He handled the finances, and Williams has said, well, it was all Dick's money. And he wrote all the blurbs, all the newsletters, the jacket copy, and the jacket copy, a lot of the stuff you'll see in the newsletters and news cards, he wrote of himself in the third person. And I'll get into why that was in just a minute. My responsibilities were copy editing, proofreading, handling correspondence, and managing the office, basically. Is that an error? Okay, I'll slip up my ones. Now, okay.
Or you can do it like that.
Yeah, I'll just have to do it that way. Okay, now, so this is one of the news cards. And there are two things about this that I want to point out. One of which is that I was, although Dick had approached me knowing full well that I had editorial experience, that I had copywriting experience, and he was always very flattering to me about the work I was doing. As I said, we got along extremely well. You'll notice that I'm identified solely as the wife of a distinguished photographer. And I think, and I accepted it at that point, I guess. I don't remember protesting. It probably would have cost me my job or something, or at least created friction between us, and there was none. But I think that's quite a historical thing, not about Dick so much, but as to how things were. This is the kind of unintentional discrimination that was simply built into the system. And as I said, I didn't even, I think it just did register so much with me at that point. You're talking about early 1965. The other thing about this is that Dick is referring to himself in the third person, and he's also created this alter ego, Camille Gordon. And she runs through the history of the press. She dies, she comes back, she goes to Afghanistan. You know, she has all these adventures. The purpose of this has to go back to Dick's conception of this as in physical ways a conventional publisher. He constantly was overpopulating the office with people who weren't really there. When I was there, now, at various times throughout the press, there were other people like a secretary or something, and we used a lot of occasionally other artists doing typing, or there was a lady named Miss Wurzer in the same building who was a stenographer for people in the building, etc. But if you just look at all of Dick's writings, it seems like there are many more people present. And we were just this two-person office, really, at that point. So, anyway, so now I mentioned that I'd done this lecture about some differences between something else and Fluxus that you can find online, and then there's an article, a text I wrote for a show that was done about 30 years ago that I feel encapsulates a lot of my experience, and I didn't want to repeat myself. I have copies of that if people want it at the end. So I just dug up some memorabilia and some things that might give you a sense of the atmosphere of the press, and the business card was one of those. Okay, so now I have to close this. Okay. This is my address book from the press. That's the inside cover. Now, I'm not going to show you all the pages, but I've selected a few that you'll see that there's this mix of artists and bookbinders and printers. Can you all see this? Whatever. And, you know, this is very professional stuff. And I was learning all about this at the time. Dick was the one who was so knowledgeable about it. Here's another page. This is the other side of the page. There. Then we have, here's F. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Okay, this is the one I wanted to show you. Here is Takako Saito, who a lot of you will know as an artist, and I have no idea whatsoever what we did with Leopold Stokowski. His name is right next to Takako's. And I have his address and his phone number. I have no memory of having contacted him about anything. Leopold Stokowski? Okay. Oh, well, one of the most famous conductors in American music in the 20th century. Classical music, totally. Actually, of course, some of you may know that Charlotte Mormon once played with Stokowski's orchestra, which was a little bit of an aberration there. Anyway, but I have no idea why it was in my Sunday Express address. So basically, that's all I'm going to show you. I think I'm looking forward to the discussion here, and I think we're all on the same page.
Board we had been to, what did you say?
Afghanistan. She went to Afghanistan.
Amazing. And Dick used to talk about her, sort of when I was in high school. He would talk about Camille Horton, and it took him longer than it could have to tell me that she was false. It was sort of, I think he thought I knew.
I have two anecdotes about that which I'll save for later.
Okay.
Okay?
Fantastic. That was great.
About
Thank you so much.
Camille's name and something else.
Yeah, how do I, I'm just going to close and close and close, right?
That was one stuff.
It is right there. See, you're not the only one with the business card.
Oh, wow.
So, it's right here. You can see it right here. So, the way Alison's presentation will work will be a little bit as call and response with some pictures that we pulled together today. Here you have the house on 22nd Street, where the Something Else Gallery was. And I ripped a whole bunch of stuff off the Printed Matter website today, so thank you very much, Matt Schumann, for having it up there for me to steal. Let me see if I can do this so that it's a little bit. You can just press the arrow. I know, but I want the big version. They just want to head forward. Because you can't see it. They can't see the big version.
This sort of slideshow.
Yeah.
This is the sort of slideshow.
That's okay. That's what you slideshow. There we go. Okay. Great. This is. There we go. Okay. So Alison, lean in. Lean in, as they say. Here's your microphone. Do you recognize that front door?
I do.
Okay. Let's see what your thoughts are about that front door. Here I have a piece of stationery that. This is actually from Jeff Hendricks' archive, stolen from Printed Matter, which actually has the address. And I actually thought there had been a minute when the press was run out of the brownstone, and today I learned I was wrong. So that's extremely interesting. Thank you, Barbara. Here we have some of these news cards, and then here is an image of the Something Else Gallery, which was on the second floor of the house on 22nd Street. And if you were here tonight, I would thank John Hendricks for putting us in touch with the current residents in that house. A few years ago, we were able as a family to walk through it. So here you have on the left an announcement for the gallery. And Alison, what's going on the right-hand side? What is that?
So I built a house with, I guess, 6 different pages. And you couldn't appreciate the work unless you went through it, literally.
So you started at the front cover and you lifted up some open doors, and you could go through the book without stepping out of it. And I rather liked that.
Yeah, this is the big book, and this is a collection of photographs from a recent.
And in each of the pages, once you were in it, you could close the page around you so you could be completely private within the page. Or you could open it up and invite people to come in and be in the book with you. I like that. There were also ladders, so you could climb over the pages. Tunnels, you could go through the page and made a tunnel out of kind of fabric material. So people would go in there and they'd go to sleep, and have to hit them with a stick to get them to wake up. And then once they're out of the tunnel, I could feed them. I made cheese and bread, and so it was kind of a living idea of a book to live in. And yes, so I like the concept of the three-dimensionality of the concept of a book, because we really sort of abused that to the extreme. We fed people in there, they could use the bathroom.
There was a teapot.
What?
There was a teapot.
And there was tea, you have tea in there. You could live in there, it was a live-in book.
So and I think this is actually a collection of photographs. Some of these are certainly Peter Moore photographs. Yeah. I don't even know exactly where this came from. They all are. Okay, so these are Higgins. Yeah. And then of course these are the Great Bear pamphlet series. Alison, why are they called Great Bear pamphlets?
Great Bear?
Yeah, why?
Well, Great Bear was a spring water company.
That was another conventional thing that they had in the office was the water.
So Barbara's saying, in case you can't hear it, his conventional running of the press went all the way down to the water cooler. Right, if you're gonna have a proper press, you have
That was
to
a
have,
big company.
you have to have a water cooler. Yeah, business cards and water cooler make you a real
And
press.
so we're so used now to just turning on the faucet and getting a good glass of water, but it wasn't always that way.
And then I have here from Primary Information, the publication of a really perfect facsimile of the Great Bears a couple years back. So thanks for keeping that material out there in the world. Here's where Barbara's card is, and then a piece of Something Else Press stationery, which is so weirdly red, white, and blue. And with the image of the Statue of Liberty. So there too, a kind of strange convention, but kind of turned on its head because of what the press was doing. I don't know who designed that stationery. Do you know? Dick designed it. Okay.
Dick did all the design.
Not all of it.
Well, yes, I mean individual books,
Yes,
obviously.
yes.
But all the press materials.
Yeah. And this is also interesting because it describes the Something Else Press as based in New York, Nice, and Cologne. Which, is that an utter fantasy? I mean, did he ever...
Okay, George Brecht and Robert Feuillu had this patisserie in Nice, or near Nice. And, and that shop carried Something Else Press books. And these associations were real, but it's not like the press had an office in their cities. Once again, it was equivalent to populating the actual office with
Which today people do all the
phantoms.
time. I mean, that's how businesses exist. In workspaces with addresses that aren't really theirs.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, Dick actually paid rent to have this space at 65th Avenue.
Oh, he did on Fifth Avenue. Oh, yeah. That was
So I thought to pull this example of a Something Else Press book out, thanks to a reminder earlier today. I had forgotten to put it in, so thank you to Christian for reminding me that this might be interesting for Alison. The Four Suits.
Of course,
from
this guy,
1965.
I like the, you see, we always played bridge Sunday nights. And we also put bets on. We would take the game. So,
Were they money bets or other kinds of
what?
money bets?
Money,
Oh,
money.
that's right. I had no idea. Wow.
Right. And I, from my father, could really say that I was a pretty good bridge player. And with a good partner, we could pretty much take the game.
So for this book, Alison produced a really lovely piece called The Tea Dictionary of Performance, which I will show you a few pictures. But first, I thought it might be amusing to read the biography of Alison that Dick wrote for this book. So Alison Knowles was born April 29, 1933 in New York, under the sign of Taurus. She studied at Middlebury College, Pratt Institute, and the Manhattan School of Printing. From 1958 to 1965, she lived at 423 Broadway, at the corner of Broadway and Canal, in Manhattan. Now, she lives at 238 West 22nd Street with 2 daughters. The others in the audience here, that's my twin sister Jessica, and a cat. She's a silkscreen cameraman by trade. Interesting use of gender. And so it was natural that she should be about the first to do the kind of multiple overlay silkscreen printing that was later associated with Rauschenberg, Warhol, etc. The graphic medium used in this book, a sort of silver print, is as yet unnamed. And we all know Alison did a lot of extremely innovative work in digital sort of computational media, etc. But I thought to show just a few pictures of what that tea dictionary looked like, and significantly, I think, for the press and for the conversation on intermedia, this appears in the table of contents as a text, and this appears in the table of contents as a performance. So, and they're not silk screens, but they look a lot like a silk screen work. So this, I think, is very interesting material. I'll just point out this thing here because I studied with a man at the University of Chicago named Tom Mitchell, who's very famous for theorizing the duck rabbit, and I think here we have a toothed duck rabbit. You see a tooth and a duck and a rabbit in those teeth. So there's work to be done, and the ducks actually also appear on the dictionary page, as you can see here. There are the ducks. So there's work to be done. And Alison also was intimately involved with the publication, of course, of John Cage's notations work. Do you want to maybe say a word about that?
Well, I had some background in graphic arts, and I had a camera in Vermont. So I could take almost anything that was sent to me, put it up on the camera board, and enlarge it. This is before Vermont. And I was using it mostly to do my own print works, to silkscreen and try to sell in a gallery. But I loved being in the camera shop. I could be alone, I could do my own work. If anybody wanted to feed me or see me, they had to bang on the door.
So how did this project come to pass? Alison actually did some of this project. I mean, it was done by chance.
Well, worked with John, and we were friends. We worked together, enjoyed each other's company, and very importantly, we cooked mackerel food together. So, I'd say we were quite close.
This must have been a difficult book to design because the number of words each composer could submit to the book were determined by chance. And then you can see how varied the types of compositions are. So it's not like you could drop in a picture and just adjust it for size page by page. It must have been a tremendous amount of work. This is a famously difficult book to design.
Difficult.
Yeah. And then of course there's this. This picture on the left is Alison speaking with, what's the name of that guy? Who's that?
That's myself.
Oh, I see. Where are you?
We're in his apartment. I think it's, 18th Street, 16th Street, and,
14th.
14th. What?
14th Street.
Oh, there you go. Very good. So I'm still smoking Pall Mall cigarettes, my hair's still black.
Do you remember why you wanted to publish, why you were looking for that part?
The curve alone?
Yeah.
Why I chose those colors?
Sure.
I remember being very interested in having the blue heart at the top almost pop out, and that the other side would be a little lower, just as maybe in love, there are things we don't quite understand or can't quite incorporate.
And I've seen different accounts of who introduced you to Marcel Duchamp. I've heard you were introduced by Cage, Richard Hamilton, and who's the third person who sometimes? Daniel Spurry. So it's three people in different accounts. Who do you want to have introduced you today?
Honey Higgins.
No. I'm afraid I was 3.5 years old. I didn't exactly need her park.
So I hear from my friend here that it was John Cage.
Okay.
And the fact is we really got along because we loved to cook together. And he would arrive with the ingredients for a macrobiotic dinner, and I'd get out the wok. You know what is a wok? What is a wok? There, he's got it. It's you put it over a flame or electric, and you throw in your oil and your ingredients, and you toss it up with wooden spoons. But what I like about it is that all people you're going to eat it are watching you do it. It's not like you're in some kitchen somewhere. They see you make the thing up.
So here is actually the reason you approached Duchamp was because Emmett Williams wanted this for his cover. Is that correct? Yes. Emmett Williams wanted this image for the cover of Sweethearts. And so the contact was made with Duchamp in order to be able to just print it on the cover of the book, and instead, y'all liked each other. And so, I come from the Western world. And so you ended up making this, do you know about how many copies of it were made?
I think 12.
So there are 3 different numbers I've seen. So some have said 22, some have said 24, and some have said it's an alphabet number, which would make it 26. But it's numbered 124.
I read recently, just in the was that apparently quite a while ago, so I think the closer you are to the time is usually the most accurate. And Alison, you said that you had planned 100, but because of cracking in the paint, only 24
Couldn't have
were good.
Right. It had to be exactly lined up with a white heart as the base. So this also, in terms of assembling images that connect Alison to the Something Else Press, this is the 1,000 American
Fungi.
I keep wanting to call it fungi, but it's fungi. Alison actually drew that mushroom. We all learned something. Do you have something, Josh? It's a beautiful picture. And this is actually the cage that I remember kind of being most associated with our family. I mean, he was still smoking. And there he is with a mushroom. And my parents used to go on mushroom walks with him, so there's a sort of connection there as well. I couldn't resist this. That's me on the cover of one of those. And then this is sort of amusing. This is a page from the paper snake. And then this is a picture in Alison's bathroom that actually shows my twin sister and I with Ray Johnson, and he's reading to us the paper snake and making up the different voices on the page. And it's very, very nice, very fun memory. And I think that may be it. Is there anything else you wanted to say? You want to say something about that?
There you are with your sister.
Oh, there we are. These are Peter Moore photographs of our birthday, or within a few days of our birth. And you gave these to Alison maybe 15 years ago, or more. Yeah, sure. Maybe that's when they were finally framed.
Yeah, is it the year was 63?
64.
Well, 64.
Yeah, they'll say. So I don't want to take more time. Let's move on to Jan Herman, and thank you. While he's working on that, I'm going to actually have Alison tell the story of the naming of the Something Else Press, which might not actually be known by everyone in this room. Alison?
So, Dick wanted to call it a shirt sleeves press. And I said offhandedly, call it something else.
So we have a competing narrative, so let's hear about it.
Okay, well, actually, yeah, you did a very wonderful thing in that exchange with Dick, because Dick himself wrote to Jeff Berner and somebody else that I have documentation for, that he originally wanted to call it Fluxus Annex, and you were the one who persuaded him not to hurt his old comrade, and I thought that was such a beautiful gesture, and he followed your advice, and so that's...
So maybe he thought it should be Fluxus Annex, and then he thought, shirt sleeves is good, and then she said, they're both terrible.
Well, I think shirt sleeves are terrible, period. But, say, that's a huge gift.
But I think it should be remarked that Dick was not quite a rich man, but there was enough money that he could take everything he had and put it into
He
the
was
press.
definitely born a rich man.
He was rich.
He absolutely was. By the time the press closed, he had spent every dime of it. But he was a very wealthy
At
man.
the beginning, okay.
At the beginning, yeah.
You know, when I
Never was he dime better
pick
spent.
up the phone and just tell whoever was on the other end, I don't know if it's a lawyer or somebody with a trust or whatever, and it just says, send me more money.
Right. And he did that for 20 years, and then he died actually penniless.
And also just his profligate way of publishing. And there are many stories, so I don't want to take up that time, but
This is important history. Let's hear Jan's.
Well, basically, before we get into the slideshow, basically, just a little background. I met Dick in 1968 in his townhouse at 238 West 22nd. For the first time in 1968, right? And I had started a little magazine in San Francisco, where I was working at City Lights Books as Lawrence Film and Getty's assistant. And my taste and Lawrence's did not always coincide. He had no interest in concrete poetry or happenings, and I doubt that the word Fluxus ever passed his lips. But he generously listed my magazine in the City Lights catalog, and that brought it national and even international attention, and many libraries put it on standing order. So I think that impressed Dick when he discovered that. Also, my efforts were intended as a bit of a dissident project, and it was a form of rebellion against authority. And you can see that from some of the covers of the magazine. But before I get into that, you had mentioned, Barbara, that he was a conventional publisher in the sense that he believed in conventional book publishing as opposed to mimeographing. which was the thing at the time. But I agreed with that. I didn't know Dick was doing that, but one of the reasons that I did not do mimeos because I believed that it was being overlooked, that the powers that be didn't take it seriously if it was mimeographed. Ironically, that's reversed, but in any case, that's why I went to a regular printed magazine. For the first issue, I typed and printed it offset. Anyway, let's see if I can get back to this thing. And now let me see if I can do slideshow. And let me see. Okay, you see that. Basically, that was the first 3 issues. It was called San Francisco Earthquake, and you see the 2 Liechtenstein covers. I did it without his permission before he knew, and then I had my friend Carl bring it to him in his loft, and he liked it, so I went and did the second one. The third issue is something else. Now, I like obliterating borders, all kinds of borders, literary borders, geographical borders, conceptual borders, and so what happened was, for the third issue, most of my associates were not Americans. They were French, German, Canadian. If they were American, they were dissident types, and I think that Dick also appreciated that. And so I was happy to color outside the lines. And the fifth issue of the magazine, that was the second issue, by the way. This gives you an idea of the period of time. The first issue, which we printed, was also printed by Charles Plymell, who was a San Francisco poet, and he had printed the first art from Zap Comics at the same time. So I was doing literary things, but Art Crumb was doing the big time stuff. This is the third and the fifth issue. What it was is I took a bunch of, I printed the fifth issue in 3 different versions. They were broadsides printed on both sides of newsprint, about 28 by 20, the old New York Times size. And it was called VD, RSVP, which was black humor before AIDS. I think if you get the point. And so that's what we called it. I did it with my friend Norman Mustin, who's working here. The first issue on the left-hand side, you'll see, is the front side of the show and of the piece, and the second was the back side. In the middle there, you'll see right there is a Vostell piece. Right here was a piece by collage by my friend Vostell. The second of the 3 VDRSVPs was done horizontally. That's a piece that I did. Here on the right is the back of it, which you'll see a muscle collage. This picture up here is by Joachim Gers, who is a conceptual artist, and he's made a big career, I guess, in Europe. He was at that time a sports writer for Agence France-Presse. Now, how do we get down to the next one? Let's see, hang on. Here we go. On the right-hand side, I don't know what to say. Oh yeah, well, let's see. Why can't it be but not now, I don't think so.
You can also press the arrow with the
Here we go, here we go. Yeah. There we go. So that's the third issue. Now, it's funny that you mentioned that the Statue of Liberty was on the stationery. Ironically, I didn't know that at the time, but if you see this top collage, it was called "An Army of Technicians Stands Behind Our Product," and you don't see Lady Liberty. You see somebody, it seems like a housewife with an egg face, and she's serving up a voodoo thing, very ugly, whatever it is. But that was our take on things. The backside Right there is from the house in the book. This is Alison Knowles' book that she was just describing, the big book. That was the image for the big book. On the right is a collage by Will Fostel, who was Fluxus and Moore, and very close to Dick. I didn't know this at the time, but I was publishing these things, and in the middle there was another Yacht and Bears thing, and right here was a crossword puzzle, which of course the words were absolutely gibberish, but the filling material was a collage. Now at the same time, I did that, I went to something called my Nova Broadcast pamphlets. Now, I was aware of the Great Bad pamphlets, but these were not in any way an imitation. I couldn't have imitated it in the first place. I didn't have not only Dick's expertise, but I had none of his resources. These books were 24 to 32 page pamphlets. I did them as a series. The idea was to bring out a rich variety of works. And a printer, it's a long story, but a printer actually financed it and warehoused it. The reason being that he had a union shop. He was printing just north of Berkeley. And when they had downtime, the printers got paid, but they did nothing with the presses. So he offered to print my books and store them, and then if he made any money, he kept the money. The third pamphlet was Dick's book about love and war and death. It was the second canto, and he included an introduction to it, which he explained why he wrote it that way. You can see I wanted my work to be more literature than music, and literature seemed to me a matter of ideas. The second one was also a pamphlet by Will Fostel on a space as environment. It was a happening about Vietnam at the time. Now, those were small pamphlets, but I then jumped to slightly larger books. The first one I did was Alison Knowles' Journal of Identical Lunch. This is, by the way, 1970, 1969.
Can you say what the lunch is?
The lunch is a tuna fish sandwich, no mayo, butter. I have it written down here somewhere. Let me just say what it was. A tuna fish sandwich on wheat toast with butter and lettuce, no mayo, and a cup of soup or butter, or a glass of buttermilk. Now, Alison put together the pages and I designed it up. Her book on the left was printed on newsprint essentially. So it's very old. And if you can find a copy, it's probably falling apart. But it was cheap. That's what the printer was willing to do at that moment. And it was a series of everybody else's diary of the Journal of the Identical Lunch. On the right was Philip Corner's particular journal, his lunch, and as Alison said, he wound up tasting every dish on the restaurant menu, which was around the corner from the house they lived in. That was a picture I took on the bottom, which showed the menu. Oddly enough, here I am with a mouthful, and there's George Machunas. Now, I never met George Machunas. I don't remember where I ate this meal. I don't know where, but I have no idea who took the picture or how it ever wound up in the MoMA archive. That's where it sits. Now, I just want to jump back slightly to the fourth earthquake, because it was very stylishly designed at the time. And it included, this is 1968, it included a Higgins lecture. You see the two-page spread. The day begins after time the day ends. The idea being that we're talking about very ordinary things which can be art. The next has another spread with Richard Castellanos, who regards himself as a very non-Fluxus artist. When I told him I was going to be here, he said, "But please, don't mention me." Because he didn't like it, and yet he was very close to Dick they had close in a certain way. They had an extended correspondence. They had also a conflicting relationship. But anyway, he wrote an essay that called A Radical Thought for Our Time, and the prime arena for radical action is everyday activities. Now, what's more everyday than eating a tuna fish sandwich? But the point being that he didn't think of himself as Fluxus. Also in that issue, I was interested in happenings, and Jean-Jacques Lebel, who was a Frenchman, one of the early happeners in France, and this was an interview with him about happenings. Now, the irony is, on that picture, this is a picture of a happening he did, and it's obviously, it was a beauty contest. Now, the girl in the middle, as you can see, is large-breasted, and she has a sign, hors de concours, I think, which means, essentially, she wins hands down. On the right is a guy named number 1, he's begging to be honored, and on the left is a number 9 sideways. And I think that is Yoko Ono before she was famous. Another, you were there?
Terry Drew was there.
I remember it very well. She was the only one who was.
It was funny.
We had her breast.
Yes. But she had a sense of humor, calling herself number 9 sideways. I mean, really. This is by Ed Richet. It came in to me over the transom. He got wind of the magazine, and he sent me 3 photos. This is one of them. 3 parking lots. This was before he was well known, before anybody knew about him, I think. At that time, Dick was doing what I think is one of the more inventive, at least in my period of time, because I didn't come along until 67, 68, 66, and the early books I was unaware of, really. This is one of the more imaginative books, I think, more inventive and brilliantly designed. And I was very pleased to know they asked me to do it. I mean, I did a piece, and it was a proposal for Carnegie Hall, and Bustel grabbed hold of it and used it. Now, at the same time, again, I don't mean to be taking attention away from something else pressed, but I'm just trying to point out the convergence, because why did he even ask me to be an editor at something else press? I didn't really realize that he would consider me in Emmett's league. I don't consider myself in Emmett's league on that level, but when I look back, you can see why. Ferdinand Cravette, this was in the series that The Identical Lunch appeared, and I did a book, this was also in newsprint, and the first essay was about the decomposition of the literary unit. He points out in it a critical glance at the present literary scene, reveals it to be either empty or overrun by material fetishists. So you can see why I was interested and why Dick might have been interested, although I don't think he regarded Cravette seriously. I mean, we never really talked about it. This is another page in that book. You can see why that was an interesting book. That's the first half of the book, an essay. You can read what it says. Another page from that book to show. The second half of the book were a series of maybe 24 full-size photos of Cravette doing his work. And he did enormous pieces larger than this room, graphically, and he'd stand there and you could see him small against these huge pieces. So he was extreme. He's still around, but you don't hear much about him. Then comes something else press. Now, how did I get there? Basically, I had sold my archive, something else, the magazine, Northwestern University Library, and I'd taken the money and ran off, left San Francisco and went to Paris, and living on what I had earned, that I'd gotten from the archive sale, but also I was scouting for the Northwestern University Library Special Collections. And when I found things, they gave me a small stipend. So I was sort of sneaking out of living in Paris. And after about a year, I got a call from Dick and asked, he said to me, would I be willing to be the next editor of the Something Else Press? I was shocked, really, and pleased.
Thought it was a joke.
That was his most.
Well, you know, the reason, but he said, you know, you're going to have to move to Vermont, because he had already gone to Vermont. He was living in northern Vermont near the Canadian border. Now, I was a city boy, but it was the Back to the Land movement. It was 1972. I went there in the summer of 72, and Dick had a large house where he built an extra addition for a living room that was about the size of the house itself, and then he had a big maple tree in front of the house, which he invited Bustel to come and wire, like the technological oak tree. So Bustel shows up and he wires the tree for various parameters. Wind, you put a wind sock, and you got electric, and the wire went underground to, in Dick's parlor, a console where there was a graph paper. And so when the wind blew, the graph would show what the wind was doing. It also measured temperature, it measured sap, the rise and fall of sap. Although it was called a technological oak tree, it was a maple tree. So, in any case, moving right along, I did the first catalog. It was 1972. Dick had an office in his own house, but he also owned a little farmhouse by the side of the road. The road was called Roaring Brook Road because there was a Roaring Brook large enough to make the mobile maps. It was on the old mobile maps, you could actually see the brook. It didn't even dry up completely in summer. And on one side of the brook was his large house, and on the other was a small farmhouse that he had bought with the property. He had about 300 acres at the time. And that's where he installed the office. That's where I moved into the office. And he hired a fellow by the name of George Mattingly at the time. I didn't know this until I got there. George Mattingly was a 21-year-old kid who had just graduated from the University of Iowa print school. And George was 21 and he showed up with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter. And he lived in the house, and I had an office in the front room. The point, though, I don't mean to get too long, and it's getting long-winded, but basically, it was a sequence where I worked in the farmhouse, Dick worked with his secretary, Melika Rosenthal, a Dutch gal, and just to give you an idea, this is something personal. I don't know if Dick asked me, he didn't ask me, I asked him about his family background, because he had a lot of money, and I didn't know where it was all coming from. So he gave me his family chronology, history that had been written. Have you ever seen it?
I have it.
You have it. In which I learned where the family money originated. I don't know if you know it. It's worth knowing. You know, Dick was about 6'2" or 3", large, a head the size of a huge person. He had an intellect too that went with that head. And I found out that the source of the Dick's, the whole family estate was based upon a blacksmith in the 1850s in Worcester, Mass. It was a blacksmith, and he invented something called a pressed steel process, which it hardened steel so that it was harder than any other kind of steel, and that was the source, the basis of
Worcester pressed steel.
Worcester pressed steel, exactly. It was so successful that, you know, other industrial companies would develop out of it. Otis Elevator was part of that establishment. And if I'm not mistaken, Dick's grandmother in the 1890s turned it all into Coca-Cola stock.
So that's,
Is that true?
let me unpack it.
I remember
It
reading
is
that.
true that his grandmother, Clara Higgins, was an early investor in Coca-Cola. But she was investing actually money from her side of the family. It was his great-great-grandfather who had the background dealing in metal. Significantly, that man's son actually went to, I think it was Worcester Polytech, and the origin of the pressed steel patent, he actually purchased that patent and gave it to his son, who then turned it into a factory. So there's a little bit of a kind of cleaning up of that line. Probably Dick would say, yeah, he didn't invent it, but he certainly monetized it. Yeah.
Well,
And they made tank parts and mess kits for World War I and II.
Yeah, right. And now they have a museum which now is gone through.
Yeah, the Armory Museum was disbanded about 2 years ago.
Right.
But some of it went into Connecticut.
It was sold all over the world.
Yeah.
I want to be sure that Martha gets a chance to speak. So
There's Emmett Harding, his art, and a few books that we did. This book that we did has now been reprinted, just been reprinted. This was all, I wanted to do a couple of books that I edited, and this was something else. Of course, in the book is the story behind why I was never typeset. But essentially, these were things that came in over the transom. And this is the last book he hated it. I chose it, he hated it, and that was the end of that.
thank you.
Well, Alice helps
week, I want to tell a little story about moving to New York, walking on 8th Street, going into a bookstore, and seeing one of those round display units with the books. You could rotate the unit and you could look at all the covers of the books. And I found a copy of Lucy Church Indian League, and I bought it. And I did not have any sense or understanding of the fact that this was a something else press display unit in a bookstore on 8th Street. But I think
Was that Gotham Bookmart?
No, that was 8th Street. 8th Street Bookshop. Is this good? So these are slides of the first exhibition of Something Else Press. It opened March 6, 1979 at Franklin Furnace. I went back to the event records. There is no checklist. So I'm going to rely on my esteemed panelists to help me identify what is in these slides. You can't see it, but let me move this so you can see it, and maybe. You have no idea. All right.
You know, it's got snow.
It is nice.
I didn't see, I looked at it. No.
Oops.
I have no idea.
Okay, let's go back. These are, the reason I rented Franklin Furnace in the first place was when I walked in the front door, these cases were already in the place because it had been a ship chandlery. So they were exhibiting bags of rice and bushels of onions and portholes or whatever it is that ships need to the seafaring public. No, we just don't know what these are.
Okay, this has
Okay.
We can all read it. Yeah.
Oh, they're not?
They're not yours.
Oh, so it's a show?
No, it's a mix. It's a mix. There is.
It's a mix.
Oh, it's a mix?
Yeah.
Okay. The curator of
It's with us.
there we go.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I can't see it. What the picture?
It's a table with papers.
There's the Marvin book, right?
There's the Had to say?
Is it?
There's the Alvin that photographs.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Sean?
There we go.
Which is how much?
Oh, there's Tommy now. There. And those posters are not Something Else Press, later. But he was really interested in continuity with the unpublished editions and printed editions, kind of things that came out when the press collapsed.
Okay.
He continued with his co-ops. Alison was in the Polynomial Research kind of group, and they kind of self-published. Yeah.
Bridget Stomach. The end.
So maybe we could take questions a little bit from the floor and also correct notes and things. Yeah.
Just wanted to, Hal did a beautiful job about the diary of the
and one is Alison. So I think some people in the audience might not know that the identical lunch started as an actual activity,
Yes.
and then got documented.
Yeah, Alison's, the journal of identical lunch is various people's, it includes receipts.
But if you go back up and say what it is.
Yeah, so
Just a Cleaver sandwich on wheat toast. That is a better meal. A cup of soup or a glass of
and
wine.
Well,
with
what did you
whom
ask
did you
people
eat it?
to do?
What?
What did people have to do, Alison? What did people have to do?
They had to join me and have lunch with me and eat that. I would go in and I'd look at the waiter and I'd go, two identical lunches would arrive.
So, and I think what Julia's asking is Risk Foods in Chelsea, is that you and Philip Corner, Philip used to rent a space at the 20th century, 22nd Street house as a studio. And he and Alison would often break for lunch and go to Risk Foods for lunch, and she always ordered the same thing. And at least by Philip's account, and I think this has been affirmed by Alison as well, he said this is a piece. This is a meditation of some kind. So she wrote it down and began to actually think of it that way. And that's when you started taking notes. Today it's running, it's costing a penny more, I got the heel of the toast, you know, and then other people started doing it too and sending me the documentation. And that's what a lot of those graphics are.
I haven't seen that book since it's published. I don't even have a copy.
Oh, I do. I'll
I would love it.
Yeah, I'll send you one. I've got about 20 copies a few years ago.
Oh,
And then you
I can't find it.
And you showed the screen prints too, right?
Yeah.
Another
And those came out of, wasn't it a,
Somehow she got money from the
Bar
Star.
people know. It was a Fluxus New Year's party where some of the Polaroids were taken for the identical lunch. So what was it? It was a group event because they were all taking the same.
That must be what the Nolan archive has.
Yes,
Maybe,
That's-
yeah.
But what's
I don't know
funny is
exactly
the
what they-
brand that you know.
Yeah,
Like our
it's a famous
It's-
brand.
yeah.
for us.
No, but Alison knew the Starfish tuna.
But I did a show of those with
Okay.
Alison at the gallery. And then when you did the identical lunch at my apartment, you put it all in a blender.
Bring it down. Bring it down.
Would you say that you conceived the book as a document that was archiving what happened and at the same time as a score?
Was the book a document of what happened and a score? That's what Sebastian is asking.
Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. At least
So
that's, the
it's
journal is
Or
that.
the document really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a reenactment.
Which is the right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the moment did a big thing, what, 2-3 years ago? Big spread, a big event, and then the Times did a huge spread about it.
Right.
What was that, 2 years ago or
So
3 years?
it's a decade
No.
ago. It's a decade ago.
No.
Yes, it is.
And not in the restaurant, did identical lunches in the
Yeah,
restaurant.
they did identical lunches in the
So
restaurant.
anyone would join.
But significantly, they were free. That was very important to Alison. With her food work, she doesn't want to have people that be separated by whether they can pay or not.
I keep thinking about this water cooler. It's so interesting.
She's asking about the breaker water cooler. Is there a microphone that we can
Look at this around.
Is there, okay. That would be great. And Barbara and I can share this.
Right there.
No,
I can pass this to you, Grace, and I'll.
If, it would be very helpful if, since Gracie mentions here, and we didn't, if you could use your name before you ask a question, that would be so nice to have on video.
Oh, sure. So my name's Lucy Mulroney, and this fantastic panel. Lucy Mulroney, sorry, I think the microphone wasn't working. My question has to do
about with the press and its interest in being, I think you use the traditional press, having a water cooler, having letterhead, having business cards. And I wondered if you all could talk about maybe if there was any thought of the relationship between Something Else Press and Grove Press. I think about Barney Rossett and Grove Press as being a really radical press at the same time, but not an artist book press, very different kind of press. And if you all thought about what you were doing at Something Else Press in relationship to Grove Press, or is completely different?
More like new directions, perhaps.
Thank you.
Actually, I know there's correspondence with Barney Rossett, of Grove Press, and just generally, you couldn't have been literate in that period without knowing about Grove Press. I'm trying to think of, there's something else that I remember, a piece of correspondence. It's funny because I can't remember it, but Dick definitely was in touch. I don't know that it was about publishing specifically, but Barney Rossett was very familiar with. By the way, one of the conventional things was the publicity that he did, because which was another thing that would have made people aware of something else, even if they didn't know what the books were. Jerome Agel, who was, I guess, sort of, he wasn't a publisher per se, but he was into a lot of things and produced a lot of things. And he had a newsprint newsletter that was for libraries. I think it was just called Books or something like that. And he was, I would say, close to Dick. I don't know how close is a friendship, but there was a lot of communication between them, and there were probably articles about Something Else in his publications.
But do you think Something Else Press was trying to do something very different from what Grove Press was doing, or were they doing a similar thing, or were they doing different things?
I don't know that would have entered Dick's mind, because Grove Press was something you took for granted that it was there and part of the scene. So I don't know that it was a specific model. I doubt it. I doubt it.
I have a question though on that. Wouldn't it have been closer to James Laughlin in New Directions? It seems to me that would have been a closer idea, not necessarily a model.
Yes, it's not in the context of printing or publishing, but I met
And your name?
Patrice Rochman. And I met Williams in Berlin, he friend with Foster and Philip, I met also. So I heard about Dick, but I didn't know who he was. So I was so impressed. I came here, he had a show here, I think it's 1987, 1988. And there was a lot of people, so all of a sudden, my English was not as good as it is today. So he cornered me over there, because this is also, I'm talking about publishing, it's also oral communication. And he said, you don't speak English very well, do you? I said, not really. He said, I'll give you the first lesson if you don't mind. And he said, have you ever heard about Dr. Livingstone? To start with it. And he spent 45 minutes to explain who was Dr. Livingstone. I said, I heard of him, but... And I turned to another guy, I said this, and he spent 45 minutes. He had a thing to do, so he said, slowly, repeat after me, do that, do this, and do this. I was following his class. And I turned around, I said, it's bizarre, because it looks like a seminary guy, a priesthood way of talking to the people. And the guy said, he wanted to be a priest at one point. He was thinking about that. Is it right?
Yes.
And I talked to Dick about that, and he said, no, not at all. He told me he was not planning to do so. But it was kind of interesting, the way he was communicating with people was very...
Dick was very active in the Episcopal Church,
really?
all the way through his life, and depending on was talking to, he was more or less open or closeted about that.
Right, he was very close, very open to discuss, and he spent 45 minutes and said, don't forget, next week, second lesson. And he gave me this program, I said, give me a call, and we'll keep going with Dr. Livingstone.
I think for him, religious feeling was a very personal and private thing, so he wouldn't have wanted to be in a position of having to communicate what those feelings were. There were things he was very open about, like his sexuality or his opinions about things, but religion was very private for him.
Absolutely, yeah, it was private, but also, I don't know, I was so surprised. I mean, in a good, excellent way.
He was a teacher.
Yeah, he was a teacher.
Yeah, that's what I have to say, but it's not in the context of publishing any days, I have to mention that. Good memory.
In the back? We got one in the back.
Sorry, I just wondered if we could...
What is your name?
My name is James Porton. I think I need standing up, sorry. I just wanted to maybe discuss, I thought it might be interesting to talk about the Something Else yearbook, since there's kind of so many something else in my head. And especially because that would lead us back to the identical lunch. There's a really interesting version of the identical lunch, the portal version, that's included in the yearbook. I wonder if there's a kind of maybe end bracket for the Something Else Press. I don't know how it's really conceived of.
I couldn't understand.
The yearbook, the 1964 yearbook.
Yeah, the question was the yearbook and the version of the lunch in the yearbook, so maybe...
Is there a version of the lunch in the yearbook?
But anyway,
Yes.
what was the yearbook about?
Well, the yearbook was Dick's idea. The press was about to close. I didn't know that exactly. But he asked me, he said he wanted me to do a yearbook. Collect a year's worth of stuff that was of interest, that was passing around. So a lot of stuff that came in over the transom, I chose to do. And it turned out, at that moment, it was his idea. I collected the material, I put it in order, I edited it, and I gave it to his assistant, Nellica Rosenthal, who was supposed to design it. Dick was going to set the type, have it set, and all of a sudden Dick lost interest. And so the book is done totally as it would have been sent to the printer. So all the typed material was typed, and pages were stamped. And the only thing he set type for was the front cover, the back cover, and the table of contents. And so, in order to cover it, I said, we're trying not to be lofty about this. We're trying to be not overly prepared. And that's why I wrote it that way, the back jacket, saying that this is just a way of saying we're doing what comes across on a daily basis or for a year, and we're not going to be anthologists about it. But it's been a while since I remember that book. I'm trying to remember what was in
James, did you have another question?
Sorry, it was just, I'm doing that horrible thing because I saw it this week in life. And there's an interesting version of the identical lunch, it's the bottled lunch. And it seems to me very different because it's versions of the lunch, but in jars with all kinds of things that would make them pretty edible.
So when Alison and Dick made an effort at reconciliation in Vermont, she came to Vermont for about 6 months. It didn't quite take then, but it took later. But remember the lunches you put in jars?
Oh, yes.
Right.
So with all kinds of different materials.
That's in the...
That is in
That's
what's in the year. Yeah. Jessica had a question, and then Bruce McPherson.
Jessica Higgins.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because I recognize all of you, but in a childlike way. It was a very interesting and sometimes difficult time growing up around Dick, and he was so committed to this press. And I'm wondering, just for a sense of the future, what would you have done differently?
What a good question.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking whoever wants to answer that.
Well, one of the big steps that he made was to take his modest inheritance from the Higgins family and spend it on making books. I mean, They really threw him out. You know, you're supposed to spend it on, you know, livelihood, or you don't spend it on publishing other people's work.
Yeah, that was a gift.
That was a gift. That was his gift. That he was dedicated to publishing what he thought was necessary to read in a book.
Well, the fact that he blamed me publicly in print for the demise of the press I was offended. I didn't even know he had done that until later on I saw this. He claimed that I was not a businessman, that I did not know how to raise money, I did not know how to run the business. Well, I was never hired to be anything but an editor, I thought. But the point is, without Dick's resources, the press could not continue.
That's right.
And the reason that it folded, in part, apart from Dick's the emotional swamp that he sank into because he had an unrequited love affair, he had drinking problems. At the same time, he got hit with what I thought at the time was a $300,000 tax bill from the IRS, which said, you owe us $300,000 because all these years that you've been taking tax deductions on the press, which he was entitled to do because it was called a subchapter S corporation, and so you could take the profits or losses on your personal income tax. All those years, you were taking a write-off, but your press never made a dime, and so therefore we consider it a hobby, not a business. So you lose your tax privileges. So that meant that over a period of 10 years, he took a write-off of approximately $30,000 a year, spending it on the press and other things, but it reduced his taxes. So
$30,000 in pre-inflation dollars.
Well, whatever. The point is, it turns out it wasn't $300,000. It was only $240,000. Now the other point was when this happened, he disappeared. I didn't know for sure he wound up in Silver Hill. He suddenly disappeared to Silver Hill, which is a drying out place for people. It's a high-end psychiatric residence where the Kennedys would get dried out and treated. And he called me up and he said he wanted to sell me the press for $1. So that he was already a little bit going crazy. He was crazy at that point. What he could do was, if I bought the press for $1, he could then become a creditor of the company. And so all that money that the company owed, the company had huge deficits, but whatever the company, whatever was owed, he could get in line. Now, I know that could not have been. I also knew that even for $1, I couldn't afford to run the press because the press had huge debts. Now, he said that it had huge assets in print that could have been made available. These were books that were sitting in a warehouse. I tried to find a buyer, and I did find a buyer. I found a letter that I wrote in 1974 recently to Clark Coolidge. I had talked about what the press would have done to continue. I was ready to do a book by Clark Coolidge called The Maintains. I was ready to do a book by Bernadette Meyer, a poetry book. I had a contract with another book by William Burroughs, but it couldn't be done, and so there was no money to do anything. So without Dick's input financially, even if he was broke, it didn't happen. One last thing. When Dick did his first new set of books, the first book was private editions, not printed editions. And private edition was a book of poems called Amigo. It was love poems to his unrequited lover, essentially. And he asked me to publish it. He says, I don't remember him asking me to publish it. There was no money to publish it. But I remember looking at the book and saying, well, there's no money. So then he went and published it himself, which I couldn't figure it out. If he didn't have money to do it as a something else press book, why did he do it privately?
Yeah,
so there was bad blood as a result.
Yeah, no, and I'm actually, just for full disclosure, Jan and I spoke before this panel, and I said that I thought it was extremely important that this side of the story actually have a kind of public viewing. So this isn't like a big shock or something, that he's kind of coming out with this material, because it's a really important, I think, thing to think about when people invest their lives in these projects and the kind of internal chaos that can come when a lifelong project that you love is collapsing. And I think that's a really important part of the press, and Dick was certainly not at his best at that time when the press was falling apart.
But nobody had more belief in avant-garde material than Dick. Nobody had a broader intellect than he, or at the time, the financial resources to back it, which is why the press was so important.
And to that question of how some of those other publishing entities were allowed to exist, there was a small family fund for not-for-profits. So if it was a 501c3, they could tap it for very small amounts to publish very small numbers of books. And so for the rest of his life, while he didn't have any funds himself, there was this resource that every year he could tap to publish the few things that he was able to continue to publish. So that's how that happened. In fact, his own finances were broken up. So I think we're just about out of time. There was one more question from Bruce McPherson. Bruce, you want to ask your question? And then that will be the last question.
It's not really.
Bruce was a dear friend of the family.
It's not so much a question as an observation, I think. In the first place, I suspect that the Something Else Press yearbook was in part inspired by the assemblies that Richard Castellanos had been doing from
I don't think so. The only reason now maybe you have evidence that contrary, but I don't think so unless it was true and he never told me. But I know that he at that time was saying negative things about Richard. So, but it sounds similar. It's true.
But
explain further.
But there's something else I want to point out. I mean, the context of the. I came into publishing in '74, and met Dick, I think, in about '75, probably, up at Venton, Vermont. But the explosion, the small press explosion that was taking place from really the early '60s, but then after the free speech movement in Berkeley, was enormous. And Dick was involved in various ways at the center of it. He was, I believe, a member of the board of something called Cosmo, which was based out in San Francisco. And the reason I mentioned the first the assemblings is one of the projects that he got Cosmo to do, probably in '75 or '76, was called the Whole Cosmo Catalog. Inspired a little bit by the Whole Earth Catalog on the one hand, and on the other hand by assembly, because every publisher who was a member of Cosmo was invited to provide a single page, then 1,000 copies or something like that was then assembled into this large catalog that presented the small press publishing world at the time. I'll just also observe yes, Dick had an interest in production values that came from conventional publishing to a certain extent. But I think that what he also realized was that if he was going to, in effect, revolutionize the book, he had to present it in a very high-end manner, so that his Oldenburg books and other books, they just dazzled. They were so radical, and they came across as the birth of something new that did take off from there. He was hugely inspirational, and he was incredibly generous to other publishers. He would talk about the business in it. He would talk about, he was involved in various small press distribution methods. There was a group in Millerton, New York, I think, that at the book, the first book bus, and it was associated with Aperture and some other larger than small press, you know, and certainly well beyond the typical offset printing that was done. The size of the books was pretty extraordinary when you look at what was generally being done in literary and arts kind of publishing at that time, which was really down and dirty, very cheap, and of course, often, you know, graphically spectacular, but not fancy.
Not like this.
Dick made those books collectible.
And that's one reason the
That's a
press went
perfect
broke.
wrap. That's a perfect wrap.
So I just want to comment on Bruce. What you want to call your intervention is that I forgot to mention when I started that your book was originally published in '84, which was Peter Frank's. No one mentioned it. It was a book by Peter Frank called the Annotated Bibliography of the Something Else Press, published in '84 by Bruce Mackis and Company. And I mentioned it was very, very instrumental in putting the Something Else Press on the map, and it was an inspiration for me. It was the way, I mean, how I personally, like so many people, got a sense of the map that this whole thing. So I think we were I was hearing you with great interest, but also I would like to acknowledge that because I think we should have mentioned that. So thank you. So thank you for very much. And because and we'll see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock for those of you who are coming. So thank you very much for coming. Bye bye. Good night.